workshops, and so we've realigned what is going to be taking place today. We have police, planning, general fund, construction, solid waste, cemetery, airport, water and sewer, marina, and recreation, and hopefully we'll be able to do that within the day's time. So with that realignment, we have up first is the police department.
Good morning.
And I will say that just a couple comments on the police. Number one, the timeline that David had worked out to try to address the mental management that the council saw as an issue has been very, very effective. It's really worked. I don't know what he did to expedite people's jettison from the department, which is unfortunate, but it seems to be working, and our overall cost of the police department is staying well within line of any of the projections that we had. Our personnel cost actually went down on the base salaries for this coming fiscal year, and so I think he's done a very good job of addressing the budget issues and part of his charge when he took the position, and I think he's been very effective at it at this point. But if there are any questions on the police budget?
I've got about 8, and I'm sure others have them. And mine are meant to be questions, and what I do, David, is I take where you are year to date, and then I spin that against prior year's actual and the budget, and what the budget is this year. And starting at I don't have any questions on the operating salary whatsoever, in case anybody does. The second one, overtime salaries, though, 285. The budget was 287. Last year was 160, and we're running at the rate of 161. So it's $285,000, $250,000 is a lot of dollars, and you're about $120,000 above your running rate. So what is going to change? In other words, if you were to straight line the year, you'd come in at 160. Which is where you came in the prior year.
Right, sir. Well, we were having some issues from years past with overtime salaries. We were actually going over, so we did adjust. We were around the 200,000 mark, I believe, at one point, and then we did just last budget year, increase that based on the numbers.
I'd submit to you that you may be a bit high.
And a couple of other things, too, because based on your question, I did a little research. It isn't straight line. He does have a little tendency to run higher in the summer because that's when 4th of July and some of the other big holiday weekends happen that cause some overtime. The other thing is, as we have success in taking the organization and shifting it from the higher ranks to more feet on the street, that will also have a tendency to increase the overtime usage because he's replacing people who really didn't get overtime with people who do and are eligible for it. It was probably 3 years running or so that the budget was 200 and the actuals were like 280 and 270. But certainly we can take another look at it, but I think those two factors are really what plays into it.
Well, just eyeballing it, it seems to me it should be more like 200 or 200 a quarter or something like that. That's
we can take another look.
That's sure. Just an opinion. It's
sure.
Nothing more. The second one, just because it happens to be very close below it, the city incentives is the opposite question. The $30,000, looking at the sheet of paper here, looks quite reasonable, but this year you've already spent 55, so it looks like that one's low.
We had a settlement of a grievance.
Okay, well,
that was a one-time
expense.
expense.
And that's the kind of answer.
Yeah.
You know, if there's a good reason for it, then it's fine.
Yeah, that's entirely the settlement of agreements on past incentives. That was a one-time expense.
You want me to go down below the line there, or do you have further questions?
I'd say go ahead and finish your questions and we'll move around.
Okay, other contractual services.
Yes.
So far, you spent 83 this year, so that one again, on a running rate would look. I mean, if you look at what's in the book, it looks reasonable, but you spent more money this year on it. You spent more than next year's budget on it already, so I don't know what's in it.
Well, we have basically all our contracts that we have for services, all of our software maintenance that we have to pay for each year, the fire alarm systems, the UPS maintenance, a lot of the maintenance that we do each year that are reoccurring each year. Again, a lot of it's based on the software, the CAD and the RMS and the live scan that we have now, which is our fingerprint processor, elevator, fire protective, detective fire alarm. A lot of that type of, that's all our contracts that we have each year that we re-up and pay once a year.
Yeah, my only question is, you spent $83,000 year to date. Is your budget going to be enough, $60,000 for next year? I just look at them and, ballpark them and say, well, what do we have to? We have no knowledge of the inner workings of what you or any other department do, and we shouldn't, because management's getting things done through Jim and you in that order. But what you get involved in, all we can look at is numbers and history. So I guess my question is this number too low?
Let us go back and check the number and find out the 83.
Yeah, I think I
again,
have the June 1 ledger, and I don't show it to be that much of a decrease.
Well, it's not. I mean, 83 is if you straight line it, but because a lot of this is annual renewals of things, it really can't be straight lined.
I thought we
you
were
pay, a lot of
fairly
these are
well on
one-time
track
payments. I think
to
you
date.
are. Yeah.
Okay. So this was a straight line number you got, Dick, wasn't
Yeah.
a number? Oh, okay.
Right. You spent 55 year to date. So if you
Sure.
spend nothing more, you're fine.
Yeah, these are mostly annual renewals, if I'm not mistaken, and not monthly
Okay.
payments. So
And that's one of those line items, sir, that when it's that reoccurring each year. So, as Cindy was saying, when they bill us, we pay. It's kind of like the crime lab. We have a quarterly bill, and you pay it, and you see almost nothing left based on the contracts. And we may talk about it in just a few minutes, but some of our software maintenance is going to actually go down a little bit, which is going to be helpful.
Okay, vehicle maintenance, I think we know the answer to that one, do we not? Schools and meetings is nickels and dimes. You must have something scheduled. In the prior year, you didn't spend anything. So far, year to date, you spent one. And 10,000 is not worth talking about, but
No, but I think it's important that as the organization is flattened out, that they do really look
Fine.
at the training. I think it's even, more vital now that you've lost a lot of experienced people. You're bringing in newer patrolmen, that we have to put some emphasis on the training.
Yeah, the last time we had money in the operating budget for training was 09-10 fiscal year. What we've been doing since is, of course, scrutinizing our training based on needs, but we've been using that second dollar fund, which fines go into our second dollar fund. So we've been using that, and I've talked to the city manager throughout the year. And what happens with that is that slowly gets taken down. And I believe June 1, we were around the $10,000 mark in that fund.
that's good enough answer. Let's not spend. I like her answer. I like Pilar's answer. I'm happy with it. I only have one other that I'm going to ask you about, which is gas and oil.
Sure.
You're going from 157 budget to 176. The budget was 157. Last year you spent 161, but this year, if you roll forward, and there may be a lag, it's rolling forward at 144. So, I'm not really questioning it as much as you have a little jump in it, and it looks like the 157 is not too bad. But anyway.
A couple things to that is the last several years I've held it at the number we were at instead of the recommended number. I think we've said, well, we're doing fine based on the year. We can hold the line there. And then secondly, what we're having, and again, we're having more officers, and that means driving the patrol cars more. So I think you'll see probably a little bit of an increase there as far as gas and fuel goes.
Okay, that gets my question. So the only one we're going to come back to is overtime, right, Cindy? All the rest, I'm not questioning. Others may question them.
Chief, I see, we just get a snapshot when we look at these things, so something piques my interest.
Sure.
I noticed you doubled your ammunition cost. Are you having training of some sort, or is that just to bring you up to snuff, or where is that coming from?
Sure. Prior, we were zero there.
Okay.
And we were using other line items to fund our ammunition.
Okay.
So this will be, I think last year was the first year after not having some money in a line item that we did, and that was the 10,000. As of June 1 ledger, I think it's showing about 2,000 odd, but we've spent 2,000 of it, so we're about $200 left in that.
Okay.
And we still have some of the year left. We qualify each year. We qualify off-duty firearm, on-duty firearm, rifle, shotgun, We do discretionary shooting, scenario-type shooting for the officers to try to make it as real as we
Right.
can. We have active shooting courses. We do send, we have CRT training. So, and we do send officers to courses from time to time that they don't supply the ammunition. You send them to the school with a course, you send them with ammunition.
Okay.
So there is a need there. The prices are still fairly high, and they're even still hard to get as
Yeah,
well.
it doubled almost, and it just caught my eye.
Yes, sir. I think we'll be fine there, though, if we can get that increase.
Both training and ammunition, just to let you know, we sort of defrayed cost in these and went to other pockets where funding was available because we had some reserves. Those reserves in all these conditions are really running very, very low. So now we have to put a line item in as an expenditure in order to meet the need.
Okay,
Are,
thank you.
Are we required to have a certain amount of ammunitions and trainings per year by law?
Well, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement
You're certified.
asks you to minimum mandatory qualifying as far as once a year. We like to do more than that. In fact, we train more than their requirements across the board
Okay.
because that's who we are and what we do. And I think in the end, it shows as far as the preparedness that they have and the education and the training that they have that reflects on the street.
And then my other question, to go to the mayor's question about overtime, in some ways, is that not the nature of the beast when you have active investigations going or other things that overtime is sometimes almost beyond control?
It is. Go back to 2011 with the Simpson homicide, where we had many, many hours. This just, unfortunately, 2 weeks ago
Right.
with Diana Duvet, we had a lot of hours involved as there. And in fact, some of our staff officers don't even get the overtime. They're just out there.
And we
doing
don't
their
want to
time.
lose that kind of momentum in the field.
We don't like to see that, obviously, but things like that, prolonged investigations do come up from time to time, and that can take quite a bit from it.
Chief, you might want to say something about our certification that we do and how we go through that training and requirements of the review every, was it?
Florida accreditation.
Florida accreditation.
Every 3 years, we're an accredited agency. Every 3 years, we get reaccredited or we're up for reaccreditation. In fact, the public notice is either just went out or is getting ready to go out for the public, and it's August 12th through the 14th next month. And we'll have 3 assessors coming in from around the state. One of them is the Hialeah Gardens Chief of Police. He's an assessor, and they'll be here to go over what we do. And essentially, that is to be uniform throughout the state as far as procedures with our general orders.
Further questions for the chief?
Yes, I have some,
Go ahead.
I have some questions. Chief, I noticed in our capital program it was talking about having more patrolmen on the streets and needing cars. We still have 52 sworn officers. Are we increase? What do you do? How many people are you increasing on the street then, as far as patrol?
Well, that increases patrol. We're not adding any positions, but when you delete a deputy chief position, you hire
when we
that
flattened out
position.
the organization.
When you go from 2 captains to 1, you still hire the patrol officers. When you delete or reduce a lieutenant, which we just did this past year, you hire that patrol position. We reduced a sergeant position as well. We hire that patrol position. So those positions are still part of that 52 sworn. It's just not, it's a patrol officer.
How many patrol officers do we have on the street then?
We have 52 sworn, and we have, it's the majority, obviously. Now we have 5 lieutenants, a captain, and a chief. So we're looking at 7 staff officers, so 45.
What
And-
that has also allowed us to do is create and reinstitute some of our specialized enforcement, for example, our motorbike patrol and some of those.
Right, and of
That
that
certainly
45,
doesn't
some of
drug
them are
issues would be-
detectives.
yeah.
Some of them are detectives. So if you look at our organizational chart, yeah, right, right.
But that's what I was trying to get for the general public, for them to know how many policemen that we have in patrol cars around the area. Reviewing your major goals and challenges, I said I continue to be very, very proud of Vero Beach's police force, our response time, our clearance rates, et cetera. But as far as what we have in our budget book, I'd like to see some more quantifiable type of goals in the future. And I'm sure we'll go into this more about continuing to research and implement technology applications that streamline the operation.
Right.
And I am delighted to see, I guess, this capital request for a computer system to allow the officers to input data without requiring further work by a clerk or CAD mobile. Like I said, I know we'll go through that, but I'd like to continue seeing that. And although we've made great efforts in flattening out our organization from what was incredibly bloated management, we still have a ways to go.
We're working on it.
Okay.
If we get past the expenses, I think, I'd just like to know, I'm now in the capital book. Is that fair game?
Before we go too far off of
Go
that,
ahead.
One of the things that kind of bothers me when we do a lot of these things is that we're looking at a budget that's just expenses only. Could you tell me, I've noted on the general fund revenues, tell me which ones of the revenues are directly attributable to the police budget? I only see 2 items. Are there more than that?
If you look, should be talking in this microphone. Up toward the top, you see some that are zeros right now that we don't budget, but throughout the year, sometimes we get grants for from justice assistance, JAG grants and things like that. We budget 0, but sometimes they do come in. Then, if you look a little farther down, directly attributable are fines and forfeitures. That's $60,000, and then a little bit farther down the page, 2 items: the police miscellaneous income and the police admin fees.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you handle the burglar alarm permits as well,
Uh-huh.
correct?
Yes.
Okay, so up toward the top there, the burglar alarm permits.
There's fines and permits there on the list.
Just for my personal benefit, I mean, it'd be kind of nice. I don't know if you could put a column in there as to where, I'd like to be able to see this revenue offset against the budget, or put them in the same areas, just so we know.
Unfortunately, the line item numbers, the account numbers that we use are governed by the state in terms of having a uniform accounting system, so we don't really have the ability to resort them that way.
I see.
But certainly we could do something off to the side for you that shows expenses versus directly attributable revenues.
Well, if you could, maybe you could put in parentheses after the name, what is it? The police is 1801, is that right? If you could just put 1801, so we know that the revenues are going to match against the police budget. It's just good for us to see that we actually have a police department that actually is not just an expenditure, but also a revenue, so it's not...
Either that, or certainly it's easier for us to rename. We can rename the line items. Instead of going 1801, which might be a little obscure, we could just put in parens police or VBPD or something next to these. In other words, burglar alarm permits in parens VBPD. In that way, instead of a number.
Because I'm pretty sure these revenue items, do they go into the general fund, or they just go...
It is the general fund.
But I mean, are they allocated against the police budget?
That's not how a general fund works. I mean, revenues are revenues, and then the individual departments are expenditures. There is no allocating. It's not an enterprise fund, I guess is the best answer. So there's no department here that's self-supporting, and therefore the revenues are a group and expenditures are by department.
Revenues are such a fraction of the total cost of the department. I mean, what do you have real quick? You got 60, 68.
About $200,000.
Well, I know yesterday we talked about the code enforcement workers, and then you had, the more code enforcement workers you have, the more fines that you have associated with that. Sometimes there's a way of actually seeing that relationship, and sometimes if those accounts are tagged to a department, you can actually see the relationships.
Again, from an accounting standpoint, the reason these departments are in the general fund is they're in no way remotely self-supporting, so they all draw from the pooled resources of taxes and state revenue sharing. But we do try at least to segregate the revenues. That's why I left the rec department revenues separate within the line item structure that's prescribed for me. At least I didn't just roll recreation miscellaneous into miscellaneous, so at least you've got some. Certainly we can take any of this data and produce reports on the side and take all these revenues and line them up against what department they're attributed
I don't want
to.
to create more work for you. I mean,
It's
if
easy
there's
to
just
do, but
a footnote or something would be good. The other thing is just a general question on the budgeting. A lot of these items, the idea that you're actually going to come on budget on these items is laughable. I mean, there's just no way that you're going to exactly get this. So my question is does a department director are they allocated the total amount for their department? And then if they come short on some and short on others, I assume they have full.
Well, they get approved, but they can do line item
Transfers.
changes and transfers.
But they can decrease on one, increase on another.
That's one of the things, actually, and we've had this conversation with the Finance Commission. It's one of the things that we instituted when I came on board, is the idea that what the department head has to live with is their bottom line. And until they reach a point where something is completely, too large for them to handle it within their overall budget. So when we started with the budget line item transfers, when you make a budget in June, it's June, we're trying to predict what's going to happen through next September 30th. And you really can't do that. You got a good idea, but things happen. And so what the department heads over the last couple of years have done an excellent job of doing is being business managers of their own bottom line and learning to live within that bottom line. So if you planned on, buying a computer and then something else more critical breaks, they've had the same way we would in our own lives to make a decision between what they were going to do and now what they need to address. And in doing so, they can do a line item transfer as long as it nets to zero change at the bottom line. And they can't transfer monies in and out of any personnel expenses without the city manager's approval. In addition, finance reviews those line item transfers, so we don't let them transfer money out of a line item that's clearly going to come in where it was budgeted. So they can't just reach into their utilities and take out 10 grand and put it somewhere else if we can tell that they're going to end up then later on being over their utilities. I think the department heads have done an excellent
So
job.
the department heads can't just.
There's no question,
Okay.
for example, advertising, if he finds at the end of the year in July next year that he's not running anything in the advertising budget, that he needs to beef up
Ammunition.
then we would go and make a transfer.
Okay.
But they can't physically do it without review by the finance department and approval by the city manager because they don't have the ability to affect the general ledger. So it's not something where they can just start moving it around. I mean, there's a process.
It creates two problems in that if they don't use up all their money, they either are forced to use up all the money, and then we come to budget time and we say, well, you didn't use that money, it's money, we're not going to allocate it.
Well, Jay, the other side of that coin is we don't want a department head to be trying to zero out and finding something in August that they just go out and buy stuff. So-
Right.
So when a department head comes with a request and wants to change something in a line item, we scrutinize what they're going to do with that change in line item. And if it's to go out and buy something in August that we don't really need, then that line item doesn't change.
But-
So it's a pretty good check and balance.
It is, and what I think you'll see if you look back over, say, like 4 years of CAFRs, is increasing, and monthly reports and quarterly reports, and increasing budgetary compliance, rather than, okay, do whatever you need to do, and at the end of the year we'll do a budget amendment. They're aiming towards that bottom line.
Right.
And a good example, maybe a year before last in August, you had something really bad happen to your shooting range.
Right.
And it had to be dealt with, and it was something that was not budgeted in any way, shape, or form, and he was able to reach in and do some line item transfers and deal with it through reducing
Attorney
some other
systems were
expenses.
broke on the targets.
And coming in under budget is a positive thing from our perspective, and what we don't hold that against somebody. If you come in and you only spend 600,000 as opposed to 682, that's not going to affect the way we look at your ongoing budget.
Well, I'm not looking for, if you come in under budget, I'm not looking to penalize the department by next year saying, well, you didn't spend it, so we can cut it back. I would be great if, you just kept going and you kept getting that surplus back. I don't have a problem with that. I just don't want to create an atmosphere of over budgeting, to fill in the
Our
holes.
operating is 10% of our budget, so we're right at 10% of the
Yeah, I know,
budget
your own
with us.
personnel.
So
But surplus goes into the general fund for the overall organization. It does not allocate. But there again, we try to have departments understand that coming in under budget is a positive thing, not a negative thing.
And I think that's improved tremendously over the last few years, if you look at the record.
Further expense questions? I was on, and just seeking understanding, on the capital, I was on page 8, 9, and there, and I'd just like you to, and you can, do you want to use my book?
I can go to what I have, sir. You're on the 1 cent there.
I'd just like you to, we've got some, like in 15, 16, we've got an 05 car being retired. In 17 and 18, we have an 03. So, well, they're old. Are they too old? Is this reasonable? I have no experience in police cars
We
whatsoever.
even have some 1999s that need to be replaced. So you're looking at 15-year vehicle.
The real key, Dick, to understand about police, reliability is more important than anything else. You've got to be able to go out there and get the thing started and move on. And so that's one of the issues, because a lot of people try to put mileage or years on a vehicle. In the police business, that's very difficult to do. And I think we had a thing going around here, again, before Cindy and I came, that vehicle was retired after so many years, no matter what kind of condition it was. And it's different in public works than it is in police. And so what the chief.
It's different in what sense?
In the reliability. In public works, we can have a vehicle that may not start that morning, and it may
Right.
cost me one or two people being down till the vehicle's fixed. In the police car, you get it out on the highway and you're chasing somebody and the thing turns off. It becomes a little more critical.
I will tell you this, too. This was put into the budget this way as annual purchases. What we're looking into and hope to resolve before we come to the final public hearing is within the same amount of money, can we take the same lease purchase approach to these vehicles that we have to the light vehicles and get more vehicles in the early years? In other words, push this backwards by doing 4 and 5 year leases.
But with police vehicles, is that possible, Cindy? I mean,
Well,
it's
that's
a
part of our issue.
specialized- Yeah.
You
I thought
can.
that's-
We did years ago, just to
Yeah.
increase our fleet and get it to where we needed to be. And then there was a payoff at the end with this program. To my understanding, you do your 4-year lease or so, and you're done. There's
You're
no
done.
payoff
You
at
will.
the end.
The issue we've been working with our, trying to figure out how to do within our lease purchase program is that the vehicles are Florida Sheriff's Association or whatever purchases, but once they come to Vero, they get 20 or 25 grand of aftermarket equipment installed. So what we're trying to figure out with our lease purchase financer is how to get the aftermarket installed as part of the overall lease price, even though the preference is to have that work done locally because the local people that do it for your department know how to install it properly. So we're hoping to work that issue out and therefore convert this and accelerate the replacement and convert this essentially the same amount of money annually to leases so that we can get more of these vehicles replaced in a sooner time frame.
I think
have
it's important to
how many-
have proper equipment. Yeah.
Right, and this past year, this current year, we purchased 5, and that was 3 marked units, the new Dodge Chargers that you may have seen, and then 2 unmarked Dodge Chargers. And the 3 prior fiscal years, we didn't replace any vehicles.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at in there. And as it's
That's why
noted,
I'm asking you.
we've got several vehicles that are 110,000 miles and over. And one of our vehicles is our crime scene van. It's a 1999, and we put a transmission into it, I think, in May for between 1,000 and 1,500. And then last month, unfortunately, it broke down at 25th Street and US 1 in Fort Pierce. So just to give you an example, that truly needs to be replaced. That's not safe, obviously, and it's just one
Is it
example.
replaced in here?
It's in the light vehicle program. Yes.
Well, I don't know that 110,000 miles today is anything particular. I mean, taxi cabs in New York run 400,000, and many police cars do too. What I just want to be sure is that we're not skimping. That's really my question.
Are we leasing these or are we buying these?
It would be a lease purchase. This is set up as an outright purchase.
Right.
What we're going to try to do is within the same amount of annual money, push more of these back into the first year by leasing them instead. In other words, having a lease program that equals about the same $160,000, $170,000 a year, but accelerate the replacement.
Do you try to keep the newer Dodge Chargers in service rather than the older Ford Crown Victorias, or is it just whoever has the car assigned?
Well, they're assigned, and again, we only have 3 of the new Dodge Chargers. That's all we have, and that was this current year. The other vehicles are all the Crown Victorias.
So in the 14-15 program, you have units S13, 21, 23, and 35. That's unimportant. How soon in the year will we really replace these vehicles? I mean, is that going to be October or November, or are we going to wait 6 months?
Well,
sounds like you need the cars.
Yes, we do, and generally, and we've talked about that as well, but generally, it's approved for October 1, and we order them, and we try to order them as soon as we can, But February, March is generally when they come in, and then you have to not only get the vehicles here, get them decaled, and then you have to get the emergency equipment placed in them as well. So we'd like to get them as quick as we can, but unfortunately there's a delay.
And there's nothing is there anything in this year's budget?
No. As a matter of fact, if you go back 2 pages, there actually is that was not originally there because we had budgeted some for 12-13, and then the timing of the ordering pushed it into 13-14. So we actually have $152,000 that got spent in 13-14 already that wasn't originally budgeted. So, the timing is such, though, as I said, if we can work this thing out with the lease purchase, we'll come to you relatively soon after October the 1st with an approval of that lease purchase package that hopefully will include quite a few more vehicles than just these 4. In other words, as many as we can fit and still have an annual lease debt payment of $160,000 or $170,000. So that it'll be the case with that as well as the light vehicles. I don't know if you remember, but last year we bought that street sweeper on the lease purchase. Well, what you approved at that time was what's called a master lease purchase agreement with that particular company. We had a great experience with them, and their interest rates were very competitive. Now, because we have a master lease purchase agreement in place, the only action we have to take, if it's okay with you, is to get a current interest rate quote from them, put together a list of vehicles to buy, and sign that. And the way it works with them is we order, and then we get delivery of the vehicles, and once we're happy, they pay the money to the vendor, and we just make payments. So they were really excellent to work with, and so we're hoping to put that package together for your approval in early October, November for his cars as well as for the light vehicles, so that we can get a move on, and start replacing things.
Would we put the new workstations and wait and put them in the new vehicles, or we would just phase them in?
I would assume you'd.
Yeah, they're based on the number of vehicles, and then they would be with this budget, so they would be most likely put into the new vehicles as they come in.
Try and keep the new vehicles as up to date as possible. And
Right,
phase
because
the old ones
the
out.
other ones will be going to
Okay.
destruction or
Okay.
auction.
How many vehicles, traditional squad cars, do you have, patrol cars?
Sir, I believe we're in the mid-30s, 30 to mid-30s for actual marked units.
So you're talking here about replacing roughly half of them over a 4-year window. I mean, you've got
With
70
this purchase, with the lease, we could probably go, depending, if it's all leasing equipment and vehicles, we can probably do 15 to 18 this next budget, with that same number.
Wow.
If it's a lease, purchase the equipment, we're probably around 9. But again, that's where it would be very helpful if we could do the lease with the same number to increase the numbers and get us to where we have to go. Because some of them are, for instance, the animal control vehicle, the parking specialist vehicle that we put a lot of money into. And in fact, I don't believe that parking vehicle even is made anymore. So it's a matter of trying to find the parts and or doing something else. So.
Well, I guess I'm glad to hear all this, and I'm glad you're moving forward now, and we're starting to replace police cars. And I'm glad you have this program, and I'm glad there's some hope that we will be able to accelerate it with lease purchase. I would tell you, as a sailor, we've been sailing too close to the wind on equipment. My own opinion. We haven't replaced enough, and if we only are able to do this over the next 4 years, I don't think it'll be enough, but that's just my opinion.
I agree.
I'll accept what you.
Good start.
I agree, sir.
It's a start, but
And we believe we can. If we can work this out with our lease purchase provider, instead of 4 next year, we'd have 15 or 16 within the same money. So we could accelerate, 3 years of this program into next year.
Okay. Thank you.
I think you and your people have justified our faith of this city council and the city councils that I've been on, and I want to thank you for the job you've done.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. A lot of good men and women, for sure.
Absolutely.
And those good men and women have really hung with us through the tough, thick and thin of this process. So.
And they're not sailors. Maybe some. We do have a boat.
Oh, that's right,
So,
you do have a boat. Yeah.
Do we ever use that boat?
Yes.
We do?
It's a relatively new Pathfinder, and we get it, we run it as it needs to be run, and we keep it clean. It's at the FD2 there on the across from Barber Bridge. If you go over Barber Bridge eastbound, you look to the right, you'll see their unit and ours. We want to do more with it, and see, Mr. O'Connor was alluding to it with these officers replacing exempt employees. For instance, we just placed someone into our traffic unit where for the last several years we haven't had anyone specific for traffic or our motors with our Kawasaki motorcycles. We haven't had someone that we could really put on the boat as much as we want. So we're starting to do that already. We just did a traffic. We're getting ready to post for another detective position because somebody's coming out. We're getting ready to do that other traffic. Again, the traffic are officers that are in marked units that primarily they'll take the crashes and work the traffic in that regard. And the motors will do traffic enforcement primarily, and then they'll work together as needed. But we always had that before, and we haven't had for several years. And traffic is one of the, if not the most complaints we get. And we still address them, but we address them with an officer that may be in that area working, so they can't necessarily give it that full attention sometimes that we would like to.
Just for information for the public, just because they write a ticket, we only get, what, $2 out of that, so it's not a revenue generating.
It's more, a little more, but it's like 50.8% off a base charge, and this amount goes, I have the breakdown, but it's
Education.
on a moving violation, it may be around the 20-ish mark. The non-moving may be around 14, 15 when it all comes
So
down to it.
they're not trying to pay
Yeah.
for their budget.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Mr. A lot of people are under the misconception.
By the time you go to court and you have to pay for the court time, you probably lose money.
A moving violation is well over $100, and a non-moving is close to $100. So you break that down to maybe $14 for the non-moving, close to $20 for the moving. That comes back to us. And the other monies go into state, different type of funds for different causes. So.
By the time you take away the cost of doing the paperwork to actually track the violation.
Yeah.
In court overtime.
True.
Another thing that the chief.
I'll remind you that if anyone stops me.
It's not worth it.
Not worth it.
Cost too many.
You have my cell phone number, sir.
Another thing the chief has instituted, which I think is very good, especially when you're trimming down in the ranking of your officers, he's doing rotations through the specialized forces, for example, the detectives, and trying to give everyone experience in those areas. And
5-year position.
diversify. And for example, we just changed the DARE officer this year, right?
Randall just got back from DARE school. He went over to the West Coast. Randall Slattery. Megan, I believe, did about 8 years in DARE, and will come back to the patrol unit. And Randall, who is one of our boat officers as well, and we'll use him on that, continue to do that, but he's going to be our DARE officer moving forward this fall.
Randall's going to have filling Megan's shoes, a terrible cliche. She did. I've been to so many of those, and I know Pilar and others have too. Megan the kids just loved her. They just loved her. She did such a good job of it, and I know she wants to go back to patrol, but.
She may show up at some of these. For example, John comes to the DARE graduations, and so they're still they've got their finger in the pie. So it's.
She's still certified, so to speak. One of our training, our sergeant that's heavily involved in training. He actually was certified. He went to Oklahoma this past year free of charge. When I say free, the course was free, and they paid for some airfare. We just had to. Actually, we paid the airfare. It was around $300. Yeah. So it was a good cost for the good bang for the buck. But we're trying to institute. There's an actual middle school curriculum for DARE that you don't see too often. But St. Helens, we're trying to work with them to do the 7th and 8th grade. It's kind of a refresher after your 5th grade DARE. And of course, we only have the one middle school, if you will, in St. Helens in the city. So we're trying to implement the 7th and 8th grade curriculum as well.
I'd just like to commend the chief, as I say, in these past few years where we've had such a budget crunch, and I know the police force has been under a lot of pressure, that you've done a remarkable job in keeping morale up and within the officers and their professionalism, and not seeing any slack or cut back there. So I applaud your leadership.
Thank you.
Well, you better quit while you're ahead.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the police?
No.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Curry.
Thank you.
Hopefully Tim is around here somewhere.
He's coming in the door. He was.
Morning, Tim.
Hey, good morning. Your voice is being lost. Yeah, they're driving home.
Oh, yeah.
Getting dead air when he speaks. I'm not getting you at all, so.
Okay.
I talked to him.
Karaoke, budget
Karaoke, great.
Planning and development, as you know, we have really sort of stepped up and become a little more aggressive in our code enforcement. And I've given Tim a lot more flexibility in when there is an issue that he finds, that he goes out and corrects the issue. We fight over where the funding will come from later, but at least it corrects the issue and then we move forward. He's also responsible for the fertilizer ordinance and how that is being implemented, and so he's sort of taken on additional responsibilities there. And he is also sort of a victim of reduced staff in his department, but I think he's done a lot of cross-training and made some changes in there that have been a positive effect on our operation. But as you know, he brings those ordinances, very dry ordinances to you, and goes through the process of trying to explain zoning. And by the way, the mayor did voice his concern about one that'll be coming at the next council meeting, so we'll
Get to guess, so.
but we can address those things. But, any questions pertaining to planning and development?
How about expense questions and then operational questions? I have no expense questions, but
I've got some on goals and challenges.
okay, good points to go.
On page 37, the completion of amendments to the land use element for original town and Osceola Park. This was last year's goal. And I guess I was going to say if we're any closer to completing.
Well, we are closer, yes, and part of it is the staffing. I try to set realistic goals, but sometimes other things come up because, as Jim pointed out, we've had to do some restructuring, and I'm taking on a lot more development review than I did. So I'm the one that normally is involved with some of this. I'm trying to have some of the other staff do it, so we'll do that. But in answer to your question, next month at the second meeting of the Planning and Zoning Board, we will have a public hearing on the original town amendments. I've already got the go-ahead, and I talked to the Planning and Zoning Board, so they're ready for that. And we're going to start on the Osceola Park. I've done some work on it, but I'm going to assign it to another staff person to see if they can make some headway on that item. My priorities really are working those land development regulations to start with. I want to get those cleaned up. They're a mess to deal with, and I think we can shorten them and get those ready. And because next year we have to do, we've got to update that comp plan.
It's a plan.
So I'm going to. We have to notify the state. We had in around February, and they give us a year to do it. So I can just tell you, I'm going to put the staff on it. We're going to do the best we can. We may not have as much public participation as it would be optimal, but we will work closely with the Planning and Zoning Board in hearings and workshops to go through it. So we intend to do it. You can't go around with a 20-year plan. That makes absolutely no sense. There's so many issues that you all discuss, from water, sewer, and all that. It needs to be covered, and we just have not done that.
And I know it's a very difficult process. I went through that when I was on P&Z board for the county, and I know it's a long, arduous one, but still needs to be addressed. You also have a goal, continuation of efforts to improve the efficiency and consistency in the development review process.
And part of what our land development regulations, as I go through it, we're making adjustments to how we do things. I think one of the complaints when you've had a office that's been ongoing for many years, people tend to get in routines and things are, you say, well, why are we doing that? And that's the big question. Why are we doing that? Is it fair to the applicant? Is it really adding to value added to the process? So we continually to do that. So I have that as I'm always doing that. There's always some room for some improvement. Maybe it's marginal, but sometimes it can be substantial. I think what we did, for instance, with the working on the tree ordinance, we made some, I thought, very decent revisions on that improved that process, and well as it was more fair to the property owners, yet it still was protecting the trees in our beloved city. Right?
You went too far, but
Well, yeah,
The minority report.
I don't
I know.
I don't think you protected the trees enough, really. But go
Well,
ahead.
Again, I'd like to see us continue to streamline that process for the developers. If we're not adding value, we're just going through motions, Last on your goals, you have continuation of effort to improve code enforcement effectiveness in conjunction with amendments to city code and code enforcement procedures. What do you have in mind to improve our effectiveness?
well, part of it is make sure they get the proper training. So I'm making sure they do that. When the fertilizer ordinance was brought up, we sent one of our two code enforcement officers for some training on that, so we brought back information to help on that. So it's a continual thing. We're looking at parts of the code where, as I said, why it's important to do the codes. There are parts of the code that are not only confusing but conflicting, and I work the code people into it so they understand it. And I think it's a two-way street there. Is it easy to administer? And part of that's what you're looking at when you make changes in the code. And when I mean administer, both, does the property owner, the public understand it, and does my code enforcement officer understand without having to call up to get an interpretation every time? And that's what we're trying to avoid.
Once again, I'd still like to see us moving overall in general to at least one or two quantifiable goals under our challenges. Thank
A
you.
goal I'd like to see is the fertilizer, something specific on it. I tell you, I was on the canal between El Camino, the two El Camino Reals, and saw two examples of mowers just throwing grass left and right in the canal. I was up two of the finger canals in my boat, the same darn thing. Now, if we can do it with a county fine, but we're not getting the job done, and somehow or another, you need something specific. I don't know how we're going to do it, but we've got a lot of lawn services that are throwing grass into and on the street too, right around town. Look at it.
Well, we have addressed that when we can. The problem you can't go. We send letters out, and we communicate with the people where we see this going on, or we have seen it going on. Remember, this is a code enforcement issue. Just because you saw it in there, unless you're willing to come down and testify at a code enforcement, we don't have anything we can bring forward in a due process thing. But we do try to work with where we know, say, the property owner and all that, and contact the landscape service. Say, look, you need to do this and do that, and I got two code enforcement people.
Yeah.
Grass is being cut all over the city.
The public needs to make use of their cell phone, taking pictures or whatever.
That would be
the public
helpful.
Has to be
And-
supportive.
I can
Yeah.
do that, but I still would like to see
Sure.
something on this. You got 8, something having to deal with implementing the fertilizer ordinance. I'm not wise enough to know the words, and if it's in conjunction with the county or you do it, I don't care. But we've got an ordinance, and we need to. It needs to be a focus in these goals and challenges.
Well, I think one thing you'll see in here that's, I understand, and I think that's a good idea, that we need to do some, I've got one of the land development regulations having to do with wetlands. We need to put in some specifics on that would tie into the fertilizer ordinance. So I'm doing that at the same time, and that's an important aspect of the thing. But we certainly could work on trying to come up with some more specifics on that. It's not a.
I wish you would put kind of
Okay.
something specific. And in defense of Tim and an admonishment to us, I think we're too easy sometimes on fines and take too little or don't back the fines that are and penalties that are put out there. And it's like anything else. I mean, if there's no teeth in it, does it really measure up? Not only that, it costs money to do all this stuff, to cite people, to have fines and all the rest of it. And I don't know. I bet we lose money on it. But it just, it's an editorial. I think the five of us need to do a better job of being sure that we get a fair remuneration for those who don't follow the rules.
Our basic philosophy is we try to bring compliance, not punishment. So we'll normally either contact a person or give them a warning up front and give them time to comply. But if this same person keeps coming back, then we'll fine them right away. That's normally a $50 fine. But we try to be. The whole idea again is compliance with our code, and we follow up on the fines and stuff. A lot of these are ongoing. That's why we end up assessing the property, and it becomes a lien. So you get those that come before you when they want to to change your ownership and clear title. So we will continue on that, but that's our philosophy on it.
Well, if I were you, and if City Council was too lenient when the liens come to City Council, I would be less inclined to push. That's all I'm saying. I'm saying to the five of us, we've got to remember his effectiveness to some degree is to the degree we back him. That's all I'm saying.
I think we've had a few examples, well, at least one example recently, where they wanted it lowered and we stuck with the number that
No, you backed up on the recommendation, and that's why we try, it's still discretionary, but we try to be fair to everybody involved, but again, send the right message. You just can't keep getting away with doing nothing. And then expect, because, I changed ownership, that I can wash away all the lien. Right.
Just for information purposes, because you did bring up a good point, Dick, that we probably don't pay for our code enforcement. We don't. And one of the issues is that you have, the grass is one of those, you can go out and cite somebody for a messy yard. But if you went to one of the code enforcement board meetings here recently, you had somebody that rented out a doghouse in the backyard and put that lady in it. Remember the one? And the way we found it is her feet were sticking out of the doghouse, but they had run electricity into this thing. So this is serious. Now, this takes time to go through the process of doing, and it was actually a tenant of the building that actually rented the building. The owner lived down in Lake Worth or something down south of us.
No idea what was going on.
And they came up, and then we sort of tag team between he and his wife. I guess it was his wife that are the owners. But again, it took us 2 or 3 months to go through that exercise. And the lady that was living in the doghouse, she acted like she didn't mind. I mean, because at one time she was living in the house, got in a fight with the lady, and then that's when they moved her to the doghouse or something.
Literally.
But literally. Yes. But I use that as an example of the type of code enforcement issues that take place in our community. You don't think about it, but there are so many little issues that get involved in a lot of discussion and negotiations. And then you go to a code enforcement board and what about that one guy that was trying to remodel his office building or something and didn't have a permit, and we found him and we cited him, and he came to at least a half a dozen code enforcement and trying to figure out what he could do and what he couldn't do. Finally, he got a contractor, and I think it was his second contractor. The first one wasn't any good either. And so you have those type of things that are follow-up. So there's very little expectation that we're going to pay for code enforcement.
Well, I suppose of the calls I get, and since we have 4 mayors here, one form or another, I'm sure you'll agree with me. I probably have gotten more calls by the public about things that were improper in the city, whatever they happen to be. And I will tell you, the people of the city expect us to enforce the codes. That's.
But we only have 2 people.
And I would tell you that the general opinion I have, and it could well be wrong, is that we err on being too lenient. That's my general opinion.
Well, and part of it, I'm not going to be argumentative about this at all. I just want to see, a lot of people get excited because they see a violation, but they don't understand a lot of these violations they see are under enforcement already, but it's a due process. Other than we have these egregious things. Now, right now we have a problem on Buena Vista that's been a problem. They brought up, right now it's being abated. It takes a while to get there, but it's not an instantaneous thing that you can do on a lot of these.
Property rights are property rights.
And most people don't understand that code enforcement is quasi-judicial. And it's a very cumbersome process.
And a lot of what we do is also I do compliance agreements where I can, where there's a situation where I want them in compliance, but I've got to give them the opportunity to do it. I mean, we could go, nailing them with a fine will not take care of a neighborhood eyesore or that. You got to work with these people to get it done. And so we've got a couple of those situations that I'm right now. We've got a couple that when they bought the house, it was 2 residents. Now, why that didn't in a single family neighborhood, why that didn't, but we know we have those out there, but we don't get a lot of complaints. So when we get a complaint, we have to, and we do have. So I'm working with them, but they're going to have to eventually come into compliance. That's the way it works.
It's a very necessary function.
Yeah.
I have
Maybe you should, go ahead.
I have a question. How often would you say do you rely on the city attorney's office for help with these issues?
My staff will go in every now and then to do it, but usually they're going to talk to me. If I have a legal issue, I go in there. But they'll talk to Wayne, who's he's the attorney to the board on some procedural issues and that. And I'll talk to Wayne where we get into issues on warrants and stuff. Should we do this, and get his opinion? So it happens now and then.
Wayne's office is represented at every code enforcement meeting.
Yeah. And though he represents the board, Wayne is very good at knowing the procedures and all that. And so the staff does talk to him on those kind of issues.
Anything else? Thank you.
No, thank you.
What next, Jim?
General fund.
General fund. Monty?
There he is, on cue.
Didn't even get into numbers.
Morning, Monty.
Morning.
Do you want us to go back?
I'm just going to pull Don in here. Thank you, sir.
If there weren't any questions.
We can drag it out.
This is page 3, starting page 3 in your capital book. Is really the better place to look. What's in your operating budget is the 1 year, just the 14-15 portion of the 5-year plan. So probably to put it in context, you're better off in the 5-year plan. And as we talked about yesterday, the primary source of revenue for this fund is transfers from 311, from the 1 cent sales tax. So that's most of what you see up top. And we have, through the course of yesterday and a little bit this morning, talked about what I've done now that we have so many different departments drawing on these revenues is I've you see the little subheaders where I've broken them into departments under the expenditures. We've already discussed pretty much yesterday the information technology items, and just now we had a nice conversation with Chief Curry about the police vehicles. So essentially what we're down to now with Monty and Don is starting with the fleet and stormwater vehicles and then the public works section. And if I could, before just to talk about these numbers on the streets and the vehicles, we talked about this briefly, this lease purchase thing. Unfortunately, because of an accounting requirement, this shows up in a very odd way in the budget. Even though our lease purchase financer gives the money directly to the vendor that we bought it from, we have to record that money as proceeds from borrowing and an expenditure on our books. In other words, even though the money bypasses us, it has to be recorded from an accounting standpoint on our books. So on all of these items, you will see both lease purchase acquisition as well as the ongoing debt service payments. But for those lease purchase acquisition line items, down there about the middle of the page, 335, then 243.2, then 40,000, there's a directly offsetting revenue line item called capital lease proceeds up at the top. And so this is really an accounting convention. The money never goes through our hands, and it zeroes out because for every purchase acquisition number down here, there's a proceeds number up top. So your ongoing expense is the debt service line items. But that's why that looks a little odd. If we don't budget it that way, we have to amend the budget to reflect it, because when the money takes, when the transaction takes place, we have to book it that way. We didn't find that out till last year. So given that, let Monty talk about his program.
Okay.
I'll save any editorial comments about money never touching your hands. We all know that. Page 11 is the first one that we deal with. It's our vehicle replacements in streets and stormwater division. Yes, page 11. Yeah, we skipped all those PD ones and things. And what we've got programmed into this year is replacement of our VACCON, and that's the piece of equipment we use to clean the baffle boxes and clean our stormwater inlets. The one we have is a 2003, and it's a very maintenance-intensive piece of equipment. It's a big vacuum truck, and we hope to do that with the same type of lease purchase that we did with the street sweeper that we did last year. So that's what we have in there for this year, and you'll see then programmed out a little later is the replacement of that street sweeper again on a 4-year cycle, so we keep that maintenance down.
Do you still have the second one, or is that gone?
It's
I think it's
Almost gone.
well,
It's
yeah,
almost gone.
John. If it's not gone from us, John has it ready for auction. So, yes.
And so to hear again, yeah, the timing of this capital lease proceeds, this is still just more an accounting convention because when I see it.
Yeah, and this shows even better. Like, for instance, on this page, in 14-15, when we make the purchase, you have $335 in revenue from the lease proceeds and $335 under equipment acquisition, netting out to zero. But the numbers there, annual debt service, are what we're really paying. That's the cash that really comes out of us every year.
Yeah, it was
Just from an accounting point, it's treated as though we took a loan and then bought the item, even though we didn't actually receive the money to do that.
I think it's great. I think it's another thing to help us protect our lagoon, to have equipment that's serviceable and available.
And
Right.
the city does. There are 2 of these in the city. Water and Sewer has one also, and if they have an issue with theirs down, we serve as their backup and vice versa. The next one you'll see is replace heavy equipment per the attached schedule. That schedule is on page 13, following there, where you see our larger pieces of equipment that we have in Public Works. And we have those programmed out, and none in 14-15, but 15-16. That is the bucket truck. That's the 125.
Why nothing in 14-15? I'll ask
Well, we're doing the VACCON truck there. Yes, sir.
And then, just if you want to speak to this money, these actually are scheduled to be outright purchases. And
Yes, these are not the
lease
lease, correct. Any questions?
Why is it for an outright purchase instead of a lease? I have to ask.
I think these are the ones that we are able to keep a little longer,
Look at these years.
and they're not as maintenance intensive. We're talking about dump trucks and graders and things like that. So they're more mechanical than they are the motors and blowers and vacuums on those ones that are really maintenance intensive.
Great, thank you.
The next page is the one that has affected the next section, affected all the city departments, and it's the where you see the detail of that light vehicle replacement program. And these are the ones for all the city departments that you see for the 5-year period.
General fund.
General fund departments, yes. The others are in the individual utilities, enterprise funds.
What did we do in 13-14?
Nothing.
Nothing.
We
haven't
fixed
done
old
any.
vehicles.
We haven't actually done any of this for a
When
very
did we
long time.
last do something?
3 years?
Before me.
5 years.
Yeah.
5 years? Yeah, before I was here.
There might have been 1 or 2 trucks, but
Okay, then the next obvious question, is this going to catch us up and give us serviceable equipment?
Well, this is what we chatted about a little yesterday. This will, if we see this program through the 5 years that we've got programmed to replace these vehicles, we'll have the light vehicles on a 5-year replacement program, getting the age of the fleet to 5 years rather than that 15 to 16 that we have now. Increasing the fuel mileage and reducing the maintenance.
I just had a question. I mean, are you guys going to be able to keep track of the maintenance and the fuel prices just so we can see what the effect is of this?
I guess we could set a subset in the program and keep the new vehicles and track those against the old ones.
And we track the consumption of each vehicle has its own gas key, so to speak.
Yeah.
So we track the consumption of each vehicle rather than price. You really need to look at the gallons.
Well, the reason I bring this up is that, typically the public might come after us and say, gee, you're buying brand-new trucks instead of cutting taxes or something like that.
Well,
and I'd like to be able to see some
We'll
definitive
take a
proof.
look at that RTA program and see if there's a way to pull out a subset of vehicles and do that. If not, we can do it manually.
The other thing is the money we're spending on this is restricted to be spent on capital, so it's not something we could use for operating costs. We come back to talking about the fund accounting. This isn't money we could use to defray operating costs in the general fund.
Yeah, but it's money that could go either way on maintenance or new vehicles.
Can't be used for any operating costs, including
Can't
maintenance.
be used for maintenance.
Has to be for capital purchases or vehicles or equipment. The other thing is that you can't see because there's only 5 years in here, is when we reach the 6th year, if we stay on this replacement program, there will start being a revenue line item as well. Because when we dispose of these vehicles at year 5 and 6, unlike the way it is now, we expect that we'll actually be able to get some money for them. When we dispose of something that's 15 years old and has 200,000 miles on it, we don't get much at auction. So we're hoping, in conjunction with this, to develop a really good avenue for sale of the vehicles, and that'll create a revenue line item to offset some of this as well. But it'll start in that 6th year when we get rid of the first 5-year-old ones.
Let's look at the bottom of page 14, and what you're, I believe, talking about is the expenditures are 298 and moving forward. I make an observation only, which is in 1819, and they're up to 548. Every year they go up 50,000 or something. Well, there's 1 year they don't, and then of course they're back end loaded. They go up more than 100,000 in the last year. All I would say is I'm glad we're starting to take care of deferred maintenance, but we're deferring some of the deferment of deferred maintenance to the end of the program. Just an observation.
Well, the way this should work is at the end of 5 years, this should level off, because as the 5th year happens, this first chunk of debt service goes away, and as we replace, in other words, as you borrow and then build it up to speed, it's going to come to a point, and then as one wad of debt service drops off, another one comes on at that 6th year. So this should level off to a place where we're going to have, essentially an ongoing annual cost and a revenue source against it.
But next year we'll sit here and we'll need $50,000 more for this particular program. The year after that we'll need 70,000, give or take. An observation. I'm not objecting. I'm just observing.
It'll grow by 50 to 55 a year, and then in year 6 it should level off.
So we better hope property values go up every year. Although this is actually out of the...
This is absolutely out of 1 cent sales tax money, has nothing to do with property values or ad valorem taxes. I can't stress that enough.
Increase that tourism, so we have that 1 cent sale tax.
That is what we need, exactly.
But we have cocktails on the beach. I'm all for it.
Now we're talking.
I know we say that a lot. I know we say this a number of times, but I think it's a point that bears repeating. This is not money that comes from taxes, property taxes, or that can be used to replace operating costs and lower property taxes. It's completely unrelated.
Where did the money go last year?
This money?
The 1 cent.
It went to more streets and stormwater projects and police vehicles. And actually, if you look at the very first page, you can see the 13-14 expenditures against this same money.
Well, that kind of begs the question. If it only comes from 1 cent sales tax and we end up with a deficit, where does the deficit get filled from?
We don't end up with a deficit. If you look at this budget, you'll see that the fund balance at the end of every year is positive. We try to keep it at a decent level so that we also have a little room in case there's change orders. But we don't have any other source of funds, so we don't.
So we are
We don't
constrained,
supplement this.
And if we don't get the money, then we don't do the plan.
But keeping in mind, on the 1 cent sales tax, this is another place where the state prepares the revenue estimates, and they're extremely accurate. So when we get a revenue estimate at the beginning of the year for that year, I've rarely seen it off by more than a couple of %, and usually to the good. So the revenue stream is very, very reliable, and so our job is expenditure control.
Now, my other question is, I know some of the other revenue funds, the tax funds, if you purchase and then that fund goes away, that purchase is still guaranteed beyond, even if that fund were to say the legislature got rid of it. Would that be the same for this if we purchased we're kind of guaranteed even if it goes away. I mean, we can't continue to purchase, but our previous purchases, they're guaranteed.
That's an excellent question. One of the best features of what we did last year with the street sweeper, the municipal lease purchase, and mostly it's the vehicles we're committing to multi-year, is what's called a non-appropriation clause. So if for any reason whatsoever, even you just decide not to appropriate the money for those purchases in the following year, but certainly if for some reason you were to lose the revenue source, you can simply stop making the payments and then they repossess your vehicles. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. But you're not going to be subject to any other sort of penalty. And those kinds of municipal lease purchases, that's one of the advantages because as a government, exactly, as a government, you can't commit, necessarily commit something 5 years down the road. So
to make another point as far as funding, I mean, obviously it's the 1 cent sales tax, but I think we have been very lax in pursuing grants, and particularly with things that affect the lagoon or other areas that, the airport's done a great job on grants. Maybe we can learn from them, but I think there's federal, state money out there that we could be pursuing that would help supplement.
Well, they have a full-time grant writer. So that's something at City Hall that we don't have in any department.
No, but I mean,
it takes a lot of work to put those together.
And we've done the best that we can. Not to say that there's not more opportunities, but you'll see us come in with, we talk about the 319 grant. We've gotten that several times for stormwater projects. And we've got some applications in now, I think, for the more use of the FlexiPave product. But that was the source where we had funds committed for the Lateral E project a few years ago, and it got put on hold because of the Vero Man excavation. And we were successful in having those funds transferred to another stormwater project that we did at Humiston Park. Yeah. So we'll continue to use that avenue as well as look for others and continue to do that.
Thank you. I just think it's something we could put an increased focus on.
The next page you'll see is the recreation light vehicles. I don't know if Rob talked about those or will.
He will later on this afternoon. But essentially he's stuck with your recommendations regarding the replacement schedule. So
page 19 is back to the stormwater outfalls. And one of the things that you asked yesterday was just get an update on where we were. And I'm going to keep one this way. And I didn't make enough of these to go around.
You can share.
Yeah. This is a map of the city that shows the city limits and our watersheds. And there are 7,300 acres in the city. And if you do that math, it's 11.4 square miles. The 12 that we talk about is the river that's pulled out of this. Of that 7,300 acres, 4,700 of those are urban or developed. Okay? And we're focusing our attention on that urban developed to do the treatment first. You'll look at the key colors in the map. The blues are some sort of treatment. The primary treatment was the original baffle boxes. The advanced treatment are the type 2 baffle boxes. And then the other blue, and I know it's hard to delineate, the lighter blue is what we have proposed in the next 5 years. The untreated urban in the orange color, I want to make a point that the ones to the west, you'll see that star that says Indian River Main Canal Facility. Even though that's untreated by us, where our outfalls dump it in the main canal, it does receive some treatment when it goes through that facility. So we'll focus on that kind of last. Mm-hmm. We'll focus on these others first. But if you can look down, you can see that of the urban developed area, we have 17 and 17%. We have 34% of that treated to date.
You define treated.
Goes through the type 2 baffle box or the original baffle box or some type that's going to filter sediment and filter pollutants out of the stormwater stream that goes to the river.
The two different types of them, what are they?
The type 1 baffle box was the original product that came out, and all it really was a sump that traps sediment. The Type 2 has a screen that the water forces through the screen. It takes the floatables out of the stormwater stream as well as the sediment. And those take more maintenance. You have to go out and pull the screen filter out, clean it, and keep those. But that's the two different types.
And there's one at 18th, there's one at Bob Summers.
There's all the ones that the DOT did for, in conjunction with us at Vero Isles, are the Type 2 baffle boxes. There's the one at the Date Palm Ditch that goes into the river, and one to the north at
There's one up in Bahia Mar.
Bahia Mar. And then there's one with the plexiglass top at Gray
Twig.
Gray Twig.
And then in Indian Bay, we have a couple.
And the most recent one we did, it's not a baffle box. When we did the Lantana Lane project that we moved up because we had the opportunity with a construction project of a residence that we got an easement, we were able to get an outfall. We used the FlexiPave product, which is, and I invite you all to go down to Lantana and Club and look at those and look on top of the inlets. And it's a chipped, ground up rubber product that's bound together with some adhesives, and it goes on top of the inlet grates. And we can run our street sweeper right across the top of it. So that's what we're going to try to do as we move into these other areas, is to go inlet by inlet and put them on top of those, so when the street gets swept, it can go over those.
Well, and I want to say, I feel strongly with what the mayor said. I want to do everything we can to Lagoon, but I like the idea of phasing this in, because as the technology changes, we're not investing in a lot of outdated technology and then have to go back and replace it. We can, in 16, 17, there might be some brand new thing we need to be using rather than the other baffle boxes.
You can see it's changed. It's changed just in the time that we've done this.
Right there,
and it'll continue to change. Hopefully, the technology will continue to get better. But this is what we have now, and this is what we're moving forward with. So I offer this to you to take a look at. It was Bill and Matt were scrambling yesterday afternoon and this morning getting it put together for us.
What is the percentage of Type 2 versus Type 1?
The dark blue is the Type 2.
Okay.
So we have about equal 17% and 17%.
You had done for us, it's been 8 or 9 months ago, you had done by size of the outfall. You had done a good chart, and I think we'd gotten down to all the 16 or bigger we had, but the smaller, and 16 inches I picked out of my brain is probably not right.
Yeah, we've gotten most of the big ones. You'll see, and I've got a draft of a memo that Bill's put together for me that I'll hope to get to Jim that can pass on to you that shows what we intend to do in the next 5 years. And it'll outline. There's some of them that are still some larger sizes, but we're getting down to the smaller ones.
Okay, I'm looking at last year's budget for what it's worth, and I'm looking at page 4, I believe it is. Yes, page 4. Last year in 12 and 13, the original budget was 150. The projected budget for 12-13 was 118. The budget for 13-14. The year win is 170. Are we going to spend 170?
Actually, if you look at page 3 of this year, it's projected to come at 290 for the current year.
Okay. For 14-15, we had projected 125. So what we're doing is we're taking $75,000. We're reducing it $75,000, and that's what my concern is. And then for the following year, 16-17, you originally had 100, now you're down to 75. So what you're doing is you're taking money out of the program into the future.
But we added 120 in 13-14.
Yeah, we moved one project up that was going to be in 14-15. We did it in this current fiscal year because the opportunity presented itself. Again, the more money we have available, the faster we could get this program implemented.
Where does this money come from?
1 cent sales tax, yeah.
1 cent sales tax, period. Or borrowing in the case of, we've got proposed borrowing for the big project at the airport at the bridge.
Is there a way we can get the 50 back up to 100 or at least 75?
Do something else.
Well, we took 100 of this and moved to the 27th Avenue outfall to repair that.
Yeah, I understand that. And from my point of view, that's 100,000 was taken away from Progress on the lagoon.
It's reduce other projects
And
or
look,
increase
I
revenue.
can go out to my dock on days and see the junk in the lagoon. I live behind Paradise Island, and we've got a real problem here. So, I mean, taking the 100 away and putting it up there does nothing for me.
It's reduce other projects or increase revenue.
So I get to talk about it increasing revenue or other projects. What other projects can we reduce?
We do have the Vero Isles project in this budget year, which we plan on doing some treatment with the FlexiPave, and then reconstituting those outfalls. So there's about $100,000 there that's going to be in the treatment.
I think if you look at the lagoon projects as a whole, you've got 50K in here on stormwater outfalls. You've got the 100K for Vero Isles. You've got another 30,000 in outfall repairs, and you've got 100,000 on 27th Avenue outfalls. I think it's a significant investment for 1 year, and I agree this is a priority, and we need to continue to address it. But once again, I think we need to look at grants from St. John. There's lots of different groups that would have grants that might allow us to accelerate it. But
Well, from my perspective, it's $50,000 too small, at least minimally. And I'll keep talking about it. I'm not going to give up.
Is the FlexiPave cheaper than the baffle?
Yes.
So the more FlexiPave we use.
Well, it's an application that's better suited for the smaller places, the ones that don't make sense to spend the money for a baffle box, which you could spend $50,000 on the cost of just the box and then the installation of it. And then some of our outfalls, that the pipes that are below the water table or below the elevation of the receiving water where they're submerged, the baffle boxes don't work well at all. So that's where we'll try to use some of the FlexiPay products upstream of that to do those.
So, and then maybe I missed this point, looking at this map going forward, is there a correlation between, say, in 14, 15, we've got 50,000, what percentage that's going to inch us up as far as treated goes? Do we know how much we're increasing each year, I guess? Or is there a way to know that?
Well, I could get with Bill and Matt, and we could take this proposed treatment over the next 5 years. We're gonna do 19% more, and see on a year-by-year basis what that was.
I just think to see that, okay, we're at 30%, 40%, how long is it going to take us to get to
maybe helpful
a percentage? And maybe we need to
tipping
move up.
point, a tipping point.
And-
You
and
got to
maybe
get
we
to
need
the
to
point
move
where
it
the
up.
lagoon.
But that way we could tell, we have work to do or we're on track. To know where we are, I guess, percentage-wise, if we can quantify that.
Mayor, coming back, what we talked about yesterday, if the revenues are an issue, the stormwater utility is one that you directly associate revenues to.
And locally,
Getting rid of the Dodgertown loan, which we talked about
yeah,
yesterday.
locally the city of Sebastian and the city of Fellsmere both have stormwater utilities. Indian River County does not currently have one. But the way
Should we?
It's a revenue source. And the way those are typically done is it's based on an ERU, an equivalent residential unit, so that a single-family lot is the basis for the charge. So a single-family home would have one ERU. A commercial business could have 5 or 10, depending on the amount of impervious area that they have. And you base your charge on what revenue you're trying to generate per ERU. We currently spend about $1.2 million in all of stormwater related activities. If you just replaced that with the ERU charge, it would be about $5 per ERU, which would amount per month, which would amount to about $60 an ERU a year. That would be status quo on your funding source. If you wanted to generate additional revenue to further implement a program, if you generated another $500,000 a year, it would take that $5 an ERU up to about $7 a year, about $84, $85 a year. per ERU. So it's a policy decision. Do you want to do that? It's additional money you're taking from your taxpayers.
It's perceived as a tax.
No question.
Yes, but it's,
Because you don't have a meter that you're running power through or water through that you have a charge per gallon or per kilowatt. It's
But is it a necessary tax? That's what we have to look at.
how directly does it relate to the lagoon?
Directly. I mean, it's just used for stormwater, so it can be used for.
I don't,
That would be a direct impact to the lagoon.
And
I
as a
got to
tax,
tell you, there's very few people in this town that would object to helping the lagoon for $5 a month or $7.50, whatever your number is. I got to tell you.
And what would dictate the makeup of it, like the boundaries of who would be part of the stormwater utility?
it'd be the whole city limits.
whole
Now,
city. Okay.
and one thing, when you have it done as a stormwater utility, everyone in the city limits would pay for it, not just
Churches.
even
Okay.
Non-taxed properties would have a charge for it. So everyone would participate in that activity. I'm not advocating for it. I'm just saying it is something that has been used in other places around the state. There are pros and cons.
Would we ourselves be billed? Would we, as the city?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
we
just like
would,
we pay,
we would
just
have
like we pay a water
right,
bill
so
here.
it would
Yeah.
become a.
Mhm.
We would have that as an expense item for ourselves as well.
I will tell you, I've served for 2 years on the Environmental and Energy Subcommittee of the Florida League of Cities. Most cities have this, or at least they seem to say they have it. I mean, I haven't taken a vote of them, so I could be inaccurate in that. One of the observations is there's very few of them that have school districts that pay anything into it. In other words, what happens is there are public entities that say, well, we're just plain not going to do it. And under Florida law, there are governmental entities, the railroad as an example, that have special status. School districts have special status.
they can refuse a non-ad valorem assessment. You're correct.
Yeah. But with all that said and done and with the convolutions that we go through, I think it needs to be looked at.
We can get you a copy of somebody.
5 years, we have what now, 29% done? We won't get to 50% in 5 years.
We have 34 now, and another 20% in 5 years. We'd be at 50% of the urban area.
Lebanon doesn't have, for what we can do. And we know, again, the work I've seen, and I can't authoritatively state it, but one of the prime concerns is runoff from streets. In other words, it's carrying material into the lagoon. I mean, the two most likelies are, which we'll get into, I'm sure, with Rob, are the septic tanks and the runoff from streets, more than agricultural in the world as far as we best know. Now, that may not be true in any river county. We don't have the research done yet. But we know that street runoff is a major issue. We know it. We don't know whether it's number one or number two or number three,
Correct.
but we know it's in the top three.
Correct.
We know that. The research has been done. I think we have to look at this because 50,000, 100,000, 75,000.
Well, that's about the fifth time you said we need to look at this. Get off your soapbox and tell these people what you want them to do.
You want us to get a copy of
What do you want them to do?
We'll get the copy of Sebastian's stormwater and look.
Thank you,
get that.
Craig. I appreciate it. 'Cause I don't know what to do.
We will get a copy of that.
I can bring back some stuff to the city manager and let him.
And I think that's only if you're going to increase the budget, then you got to check on do we have the personnel and the equipment to supervise it.
I know.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've listened to enough at the Florida League of Cities to know there's pros and cons with it, but. Okay, I'm sorry.
We'll get you that information.
Thank you.
Moving through the budget to page 20, new sidewalks. What I've tried to do is, and I didn't get these pages in each of your book, but if you have a question of where these are, I've made some maps that I can show you. But the two sidewalks that we want to do next year, one is in McCanch Park, 23rd Street, Navarre Avenue, as it goes up to Troy Moody.
Yeah.
That's this one. And then the other one is on Ocean Drive, the sidewalk. All the sidewalks on Ocean Drive are 4 feet wide. Two people cannot walk on them shoulder to shoulder. And if you went over there after the season, you noticed the grass was like a cow path where the people had walked on it. So we want to do next year the segment between Humiston Park and Sexton Plaza. We chose that because when Costa de Este did their site plan, we had them widen their sidewalk in front of their building. So that 200 feet's already done. So we could do that and people could see what it would look like. And then in future years, we'd continue to widen that sidewalk on the east side and then move over to the west side and do that. But I think that's a very needed project for our tourism.
On the last one, is that
Yes, sir.
going to be on both sides of the street? Or
It would just be one side.
One side?
Yes, sir. At the present time, we're trying to get some PED facilities in areas where they're not there now, and there is a lot of PEDs that go to Troy Movie Park.
Yeah, a lot. Okay.
Okay. Questions?
And just for the public, I mean, when you're looking at evaluating sidewalks, and I know you've got another item in here, just sidewalk repairs, that y'all have specific criteria that you utilize to evaluate where do you go next, that it's a prioritized system.
The first thing we try to do is look at where there were open segments of sidewalk that could connect to each other, and then where there was a pedestrian, a tractor, or in the case of Ocean Drive, where there was a facility that was not adequate for the amount of use it was getting.
Right. Thank you.
The next one, 16th Street culvert replacement. There are culverts at 3 locations on 16th Street that need to be replaced. It's between 29th Avenue and 24th Avenue.
We've got galvanized pipe there that it's rusted.
They were old metal pipes, and we'll be putting back in either a corrugated aluminum or a ADS product, which I don't know for sure what we'll use on those yet.
But something other than
yes.
Thank you.
The old asphalt-coated metal pipes were the state of the art 30 years ago.
Once
and
again,
now you pull one of those out, and you got the pipe on top is still good, and the bottom where the water is gone. And we will, as 16th Street is a county road, we'll coordinate with In River County to make sure that they don't have a resurfacing project that they put in before we go cut the road. So,
right.
Vero Isles, the next one, and stop me, I'll be glad to talk about any of these you want or not. But what we are going to do in Vero Isles is 2 real innovative things. One, we'll do the flexi pave on the inlets, but Vero Isles is heavily developed, heavily landscaped. The outfalls are usually 2 on each side of the street that go to the river, and they're 8-inch or 12-inch clay pipes, landscaping all over the place. So we're going to do a pipe bursting project where you take it's a polymer material that you can pull through the existing pipe, and then you, with pressure and heat, you expand it and it breaks the other pipe, and actually sometimes you can get a bigger pipe than you had, and then that is a pipe with no joints. The old clay pipe, 8-foot pipes where they're joined together, you get roots in them, and so we hope to be able to avoid a lot of headaches with landscape that would have to come out if you would dig one pipe out and put another one in.
And minimize future maintenance, too.
And finally, the bridge replacement at 34.
This has been one of my goals, is to get all our bridges kind of up to current standards. This one has been rated by DOT as their terminology is structurally sufficient but functionally obsolete. That's a lot. But which means start finding a way to get it done. This will be the last one of the bridges in the city that hasn't been done. We've gotten all the others replaced in my time here, so they should be good for another 40 years or so. But we partnered with Eric at the airport. He got DOT grants for the lion's share of this project. It's a $4.5 million project, and Eric got $3.6 million in grants, matching funds from the airport, and then we're going to do some borrowing And Cindy and I, again, you have a 50-year life cycle of this bridge. We don't feel bad at all about borrowing for a project that's going to have that kind of cost. And again, we'll have all of our bridges then being up to current standards. Annual street resurfacing we talked about yesterday.
I have a question about that, and it's not, it's a little bit of a tangent, but it really is not. Explain to me, Jay or city manager or Cindy, what the economics are of the golf course and what the potential solution would be if we weren't saddled with the debt on the golf course. In other words, I want to understand the possibility of us really accomplishing that.
If we could sell the golf course, and let's say that we
Who
couldn't-
owns it?
We do, with deed restrictions.
And a mortgage.
And a mortgage. And a mortgage that far exceeds the value of the property.
It's about 5 million.
So the mortgage is for how much?
5 million. We have 5 million in outstanding debt service.
Okay.
But the deed restrictions are the big issue. It's for parkland only. And that we have to get approval from the county in order to waive that restriction. As a value as a parkland, it has little or no value. We're working on our second guy to come in there and do a little golf course driving range. So if we could get that deed restriction removed, then we try to sell it, reduce our debt service, which is taking our 1 cent sales tax, and we would put that back into capital projects.
Okay, and what is the debt service? How much is it? 600?
5 million.
Between 6 and 700,000.
Annually, it's about 660, 675,000 through 2025.
So that would be our entire street budget right there.
That competes directly with all the projects we just talked about.
So, okay, but if we sold it, we would have a loss, which we'd have to book as a loss, right?
No, at this point, and I'm just going to go back and correct myself because we're still paying off that second note. As of the end of 12/13, the debt service was still at about 6.9. When you see the one piece of debt service that drops off in 16/17, the first $5 million will be gone, and what we'll have left, is $5 million more that runs out till about 2025. This is on the books at the original purchase value, and
Which is what, 10 million?
was the 10 million. It was 10 total at the beginning. So
Wonderful.
I think realistically, we just want the deed restrictions removed just so we can start looking at the options. I mean, we can't even think about options without that deed restriction removed.
That is very true.
But as far as recouping the 1 cent sales tax, how much do we owe on it right now?
as of the end of 12/13, we owed 6.9, and we've made a couple of more debt service payments this year, so closer to 6.
So let's say we sold it for some number, 4 million, 5 million. I'll just pick 4 million. What would we do with the residual 2.9 million that we still owe that we sold it as a short sale? I mean, we're talking about selling it as a short sale.
Our debt service would go down substantially. I mean, we'd still owe that money, but our debt service, annual debt service payment would go down substantially.
So if we were able to reduce it 4 million, 5 million, 3 million, whatever the number is, I don't want to talk numbers, but for obvious reasons, then we would be freed up of the debt service
Well,
on
you'd be
that.
reducing that 665 annual debt service payment to maybe 200,000. So that would give free you up another 400.
That we
So
could
we'd
put
be
into a street
talking
program.
about,
For
and
streets.
I agree with what you said. I mean, we first got to do what I think you're going to start doing. But what we're really talking about in the long run is a short sale. We'll still have some debt left over, and we'll free up something for
You see
construction.
an improvement. I had a conversation with Mr. O'Connor yesterday about approaching the county and suggested that possibly the letter that we send comes from the mayor. And so Mr. Kramer came up with this idea, maybe he would present it to the commission as a whole as opposed to doing it to the county administrator, keep the transparency, and have the whole commission as a whole review it.
And address the letter to the chairman of the county commission.
Sounds like
My
a good plan to
suggestion,
me.
if-
How about,
I think that helps bring the public involved too, and why our streets may not be where they need to be, and what do we want as a community to make that happen.
Jay, do you buy into all that?
Well, I'm thinking the 1 cent sales tax, is that Is that money eligible to be used for the baffle boxes?
So that's what we're using.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right.
Absolutely.
Any
So
capital investment.
So it really is, it can be tied as an environmental issue.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Certainly can sell it, or, yeah.
This, I think, if we're in the capital book, if you go to page 47, I think it becomes, the finances of this become much clearer. This is the money where our 1 cent sales tax comes in, then we use it for things. If you look in 14-15, that 199 in debt service is Dodgertown. And then going down 2 lines, that 492 in debt service is Dodgertown. The 199 being the loan that was constructed as interest only. And in 16-17, when the bigger one goes away, you see that interest only one becomes $662,000 a year. So it kicks into principal and interest, and that one carries on until 2025. 2 lines down or 3 lines down, you see the transfer to 304. That is all the revenue that we put into general fund construction to do all the things we've been talking about. So if that debt service goes down or goes away, the amount of money we transfer to 304 for stormwater, streets, and sidewalks can go up by the corresponding amount. It's a dollar for dollar. We do.
I think it's an excellent plan, and I would have difficulty thinking that we can use it for baffle boxes and streets, which are good for the county.
Mm-hmm.
Why the county would oppose us, but you're the one that has to present it.
That's the part I'm...
Well, yeah, that's why I was thinking maybe it's better to present it to the county commissioners rather than the staff over there.
Absolutely.
And we are putting some research into that. Wayne and his staff are sort of making sure we understand exactly what we'll be asking for before we...
Well, there needs to be a political case for this rather than well, we have some difficulties with the staff over there at the county, and sometimes their economic. I wouldn't say that they're looking out at the best interest of Vero Beach. They're looking at the best interest for the county, which is what they should be doing. But somehow we've got to be able to present this as goodwill for both county residents and city residents. And I think, being that this is a cleanup of the Indian River Lagoon project, I don't know why they would say no.
Yeah, it compared, with their marshes and all the rest of it. It compares very nicely. That's what we're trying to do.
I think it's worth a try to go, like I said, to the commission direct.
We'll proceed with that.
Okay. Any other questions on the paving? The next project is secondary drainage. We have 4 culverts that we'll replace. Locations are specified there. If you would like, I can get you copies of the map that show those, but it's just our regular maintenance activities. Sidewalk and curb replacement. This is just one where we make repairs, grind sidewalks if we have something that breaks. This isn't the construction part. This is the maintenance item. The next one is the big one we talked about, the 27th Avenue head wall replacement. We've got a concept for that design. We've met with Indian River Farms. David Gunner has looked at it with us. They've made some recommendations, and we're working on that design now. But after the budget's approved, we'll make that repair and get that back in good shape.
And this is a requirement from Indian River Farms Water Control District?
This is the one that failed, the head wall that...
Yeah, I know where it is, but it requires that it be removed.
Well, it drains into there, so we had a failure. They said, you got to fix it or get it out of here.
And they give us a time frame with this imposition?
David knows that we're working on it, so he's good with that.
Great.
We're watching it as we go by across the bridge every day almost. So, McWilliam Park boat ramp. This project is the matching funds for the grant to do the design on the restrooms that would use the step system for the wastewater. The next one, page 29, we put this project in, and if you come down State Road 60 from 43rd Avenue into town, you'll notice that we have numerous medians there that have some form of vegetation that we have to mow. I don't want to call it grass, but we do have to mow it. a couple times a month. That's really intense maintenance. When you mow it, we have to have the street sweeper go by.
And dangerous for the employees.
So what we've done is we've come up with a 5-year project to take all those medians and take the grass out of them, put back in the EnviroTurf, which is the ornamental peanut, plus some other plantings to make those medians as you come into our city look better. And we've shown $10,000 a year for 5 years. We'll start at the sign that says Downtown Vero and work from there to the west, so we have a continuous project. And we'll do the work in-house. Nanette's done the design. There's already water available in those, so we can hook up and get the plants irrigated until they're established. Then the needs for irrigation would be way down with the type of material that'll be in there. So we put that in as an aesthetic project for as you come into Vero Beach from the west, and also to reduce those maintenance needs and make it easier for us.
I think it's a great idea. I'd like to see a lot more of those.
20th Avenue, some more culvert replacements. There's 3 of those along 20th, 25th Street, 24th Street, and 22nd Street.
Spread over a couple of years.
Yeah. 1 in 14-15 and 2 in 15-16. The next one is Indian Bay curb and radii repair. The Indian Bay subdivision, and the streets are real narrow because of the curbs that are in there. The cul-de-sacs, when they were constructed, were single lane, large medians. Turning radius is bad, you can't get around there. So we have come up with a project to widen the throats of the radiuses in the roadways and to make the medians larger or smaller in the cul-de-sacs so cars can get around. We'll also remove the street light that's right in the middle of this intersection, which was hit last week. And this work can be done in-house. So we put that in over a couple-year period to make those changes. This subdivision, when it was built and accepted by the city, the standards were either non-existent or not followed because you couldn't build streets like that today.
What year?
50s, maybe.
Yeah,
It will also help us quit fighting with the family over the rock. where our garbage truck-
Is the street going to be wider here? Because it is.
It'll be the same width, but what we'll do is in the turns, we'll make these turns wider. We'll make these turns wider, and we'll make the lanes wider in the cul-de-sac.
Is that better for emergency vehicles?
Yes, fire access will be better. And when somebody stops, you can get around it now. If somebody stops in that cul-de-sac now, you have to drive over the curb and go across the median.
Are you guys going to change the curbs themselves so they're a little smoother? Or?
Just in the area that we're working.
But it really is needed here.
And if this project's approved, what we would do is meet with the neighborhood, show them what we're doing. Some in there have expressed a desire to improve their landscaping, but this would give them an opportunity to know what's going on, and we'd work with them there.
There's some problems as far as landscaping down in the cul-de-sac, particularly on the north side of it, for what it's worth. But it's private property, whatever.
Okay, the next one, 2 culverts that we'll fix next year in the Airport West subdivision. Again, it was those old asphalt-coated metal pipes. The bottoms are starting to go away in them, so we'll make those repairs next year there. The next one, replace the City Hall emergency generator. We had an issue just last week with the generator, and what we hope to do is, if you folks are in favor of the capital program we've presented, we're going to go ahead and start moving forward on this project to have it ready to go and maybe even out to bid before October 1. The generator that's there only powers about 1/3 of the building. In 2004, when we had to use City Hall back after the hurricanes, you had to look around for a an outlet that had an orange plate on it to be able to get power. And it was very cumbersome. So we'll be replacing that generator with one that will power it, the whole building.
What kind of lifespan do you think? I mean, 40 years is a lot, but what do you think we can get out of the new generator?
I'm guessing 25 years would be a reasonable estimate.
So, okay. And if in the next 25 years this building were to not be here, can that generator move
yes,
with us?
Yes, it could.
Okay.
Yes, it could.
And a question with this building not being completely occupied, do we need to cover 100% of it? Or might as well, the dollar difference is so little to do half or three-quarters.
Unless we shut one wing completely down and move to another because, yeah.
Okay, just want to ask.
Yeah, be using
Certainly in
space.
an emergency area, we'd have it.
How big a generator is that?
The one that's in there now is like 100. This would be a 250 or 300 kW.
250 kW?
Yeah.
Diesel?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. We looked at, when we first came up with this project, to tie the police department and city hall together, but the copper wire and the size of the copper that would run between it is more expensive than the generator. So, yeah. Next project, Young Park seawall. We have some issues with the cap in there, so this project would replace the cap and new dead men and tiebacks for the wall. It's been on our radar for quite some time.
I've got pictures of it that
Yeah.
I took from the water, and it needs work.
It does need work. I think that takes care of the projects that we have in the current year. The next ones are further out. I'll be happy to go through those quickly if you'd like.
Do we? And you're also going to do the waste management too, right? That's the next.
Solid waste, yes.
Solid waste.
Yes.
Why don't we take a 10-minute break or something? We'll come back at 5 after 11. Is that suitable?
Great.
Right.
Okay.
And then press forward.